Hi, Mom Professionals. This is Alia. Today we have a very special person. She's an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur, I don't think we truly understand what it takes to be in that space, to keep at it, make things happen, and all this is primarily driven by the entrepreneur themselves. So, Amneh,
Hi, Alia.
how are you?
Great.
Welcome.
Very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Amneh, tell me about your journey.
Gosh, so I didn't start off wanting to be an entrepreneur at all. It was really not a space I was looking at. I started off my career in what's called the social development sector, or what people commonly call not-for-profit, charity, whatever, that sector. Worked for many years in environment, in economic empowerment, and had my first child. Was able to bounce back, go back to work full-time, 9 to 5. It was great. I think Anya, so my daughter, was really accommodating as a child, and she did really well in crowds, so I could take her anywhere. But by the time I had my second kid, he was born with a very different personality. He didn't like crowds, didn't like noises, wanted things at very specific times. He does well, very well with the schedule. So my first child was quite feral, but my second was very born scheduled. And I struggled with going back to work with that whole 9 to 6 kind of schedule. And that's what really led me to entrepreneurship, the ability to work for myself, be flexible, find my own schedule, and just not have to kind of set my own targets. I mean, that was the idea. But as you said, I think I underrated, as we all do, I think, the pressures that come with it. So while it's all very nice to have that flexibility, there's a lot of juggling. So throughout the day, I feel like I wear so many hats. All women do. You're a mom one second, then you're a business person, and the next minute you're the butler in the house dealing with the plumbers. You're many, many things in one day. But I think when you're an entrepreneur particularly, and specifically because my business is socially directed, so I'm a social entrepreneur, it also means that I must make things happen, otherwise they won't happen at all. And there isn't a team to pick up my slack. Well, now I have a team, but initially there was nobody to pick up the slack. It was just myself and my partner, and we had to drive ourselves and remind ourselves that this needed to be done, this was worth doing. And I think that's where the worth doing bit was what helped me. Had there not been a social purpose, I would have been a lot less inclined to deliver. But I think that's what keeps me personally motivated, that I can do this. I can make a difference here, and why shouldn't I? And I really, really should. But I do believe you're right. The hustle is stupidly glorified. It's a dumb message to give young children. This is really hard, thankless work.
But I think that going forward, this generation actually doesn't have a choice either, because the jobs are shrinking.
Yeah, yeah.
The companies are not, as they say, this is the gig economy. And while it started in the US, I think we are moving very fast in the same direction. So tell me, what are some of the challenges that you've faced being in the space, and if any, as a woman?
Gosh, I always find that a bit of a difficult question, and I think the way I address it now is by first owning my privilege. So I come from a background and have worked in a sector where women do find it easier. So I didn't have a lot of the traditional struggles. I have great parents, so growing up I didn't have any issues being a girl. I have great in-laws, I have a great husband. I've always had friends who've understood. So to be honest, sometimes I feel like a bit of a scamster saying something about being a woman. But having said that...
And you had mentioned the syndrome. There's a syndrome there, right?
Yeah. That I'll talk about in a minute. That's the imposter syndrome, but that's, But I mean, I just feel like, however, when you engage with people outside what I call, your friends and family circle, where I was very, very safe, very never in any kind of special need of special consideration for being a woman. But once you step outside that and you come out into what I would call the real world, oh gosh, it's crazy. And that's when you suddenly realize that, wow, when people talk about bro culture and they talk about women being excluded from spaces, when people, for me, it's a huge indicator. If you're not above 60 and you're starting a conversation by saying, dekhe Bibi, ya dekhe beta. I know things are going downhill, right? And I have more and more of those conversations every day. Like whether you're dealing with tax authorities or you're even dealing with your landlord for a commercial space that you're working in, it's just like, dude, you think I got into this because I don't even know what I'm doing? I know what I'm doing. But that's horrific, and it's everywhere. And
So is it a lot of unwanted advice that you get, or
patronizing advice?
Okay.
It's ridiculous advice. So I'll give you an example. So we started 3 years ago as an e-commerce website. The whole idea was to bring craft online, kind of be Etsy, except with a social agenda. So bring all these beautiful, incredible, small businesses, many of which are run by women, again, much like myself, and artisans, and bring them online and showcase them to the world, because many of them struggle to gain traction in mainstream markets. So that was the purpose. And and because I come from a research background, I was like, oh gosh, so now I need to look at where the market is. And at that time, Daraz and Kemu were quite new, and people were still getting used to the idea. This is about 3.5 years ago. I remember getting in touch with somebody, and I'm not going to say which one of these two it was, but it was one of them, somebody quite senior there, and the conversation went something like this. He said, "Bibi, aapne Facebook ka suna hai?" And I was completely like, I didn't even know how to respond to that. I was like, gee, of course maine suna hai. Facebook kya hota hai? And he's like, aap aisa kare na, aap rilliyan bechna cha rahi hain. I said, nahi, not just quilts. There's plenty of other products. Nahi, really to bechengi na? And I said, gee. And I said, gee. And he said, to aap ek Facebook page bana le? And I was thinking, this is the advice I went looking for. I didn't even know what to say to the dude. I was like, gee, thanks. I mean, but like here I am trying to set up an e-commerce venture, and you're telling me aap ek Facebook page banane, because that's the most insightful thing you can say to a woman. And it only happened to me because I'm a woman. He would never do that to a guy.
You think so?
100% sure. Okay. Because he was like, oh, this is a woman who needs something to do to pass her time, so she can feel like, well, I mean, I know a lot of us are driven by this need to not kind of completely erode our intellectual capacities. I think that is one of my biggest fears, that I'm going to become dumb if I'm not doing something. So like using my brain. If you just keep changing enough diapers, I'm sure it affects your brain somehow. But to survive that, many of us clutch at opportunities where we're writing, or we're speaking, or we're blogging, or we're creating something, right? So this is what drives so many of us. And I feel like he saw that, the clever of him, he saw that desperation, and he's like, this will be enough for you. Don't reach any higher. There's really no need. And I was like, wow. I mean, and again, I came from a place of privilege where I was introduced by somebody who he really shouldn't have treated me that way, but he did. I believe he's moved on. He's no longer in the system, just to say. But
there are many.
Many.
But I think that's not just true for men. I think there are a lot of women also out there who tend to give this kind of
again,
advice.
this is where I've been really lucky. So honestly, I don't think I'd be able to do half of what I do if I didn't have my female champions and friends. The people who I can call if a meeting is running late and I know my kids are going to be okay. It doesn't happen often. I try and make sure that I'm there for the school run, there for the party, always available. But if I can't be, there's so many women I know, and I'm just one phone call and I know it's all sorted, and I definitely couldn't have done that. So I've been very lucky. My female friendships are deep, abiding, and probably a major source of strength.
And something that you must have cultivated
I don't know if I was being strategic at the time, but now it looks like the most self-serving thing I could have done is invest in my female friends. They're the most amazing people in my life. So my parents moved abroad a few years ago. Otherwise, obviously, it was great to have just leave Nana Nani ke saath. And as I said, my in-laws are great, but sometimes you just need something to happen immediately. Like you're in a crisis and you need somebody. People used to talk about this whole thing. You and I were talking about it at one point. This idea of the village raising the kids.
Yeah.
And we talk about it, and it's a particularly commonly used phrase when you look at parenting spaces and parenting blogs and communities. Takes a village. But most of us now raise our kids in a way, and I was raising my kids, I own it that way, where it's like I'm the primary parent, I'm the primary caregiver, because that is how you get validation, right? And society encourages you to get that validation because being a mother is just your top priority. So what are you doing as a mother? Everything else is secondary. If you failed as a mother, then whatever else you might have achieved is, people will say things to you, at what cost? Was it worth it? And this is where the village.
That's also a bit drastic, right?
Of course.
Because it's not like if you're working, then God, you're going to completely abandon the child.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I think research proves this, that working women may spend less hours with their kids, but stay-at-home moms will spend less quality time with their kids. So it's not like stay-at-home moms are attached to their kids bum down. They cook, they clean, they sleep, they do so many things. And it's the same thing with working moms, right? So we will make an effort that whatever time we spend with our children is it's like concentrated doses of here's your mommy and here's what you're getting. And it's wonderful for the children.
And I think they're happier also, right?
Because you're a more fulfilled parent, so you're able, you cannot give from an empty cup if you're always frustrated. And if you're not frustrated staying at home, that's wonderful. That's just actually such an enviable position. Like my big dream in life is that one day I want to be a begum. Just sit at home and do nothing and be happy in that state.
But I really don't think
I don't think it's gonna happen. And every year I'm like, this is the year I'll become a begum. But it doesn't happen for me because I get stressed being in that space. And there's plenty of women who thrive in those spaces, and that's wonderful because those are the women I can depend on then, right? If all of us were out there, who would we call? Yeah, it's
amazing, incredible. And you've written a book?
I have. So, and I think this is where I feel like children, there are no studies on this, is my theory, but children are a great driver for female entrepreneurship. I would not be an entrepreneur at all. I would have stuck with my consulting work. I still do consulting work. I love it, don't get me wrong. I love the work I have done in the development sector. It's made me who I am today. But, I wrote that book because I wanted my daughter to read a book like that, and there wasn't one out there. She was really interested in the feminist movement, very young. Again, that comes from my work, right? So I'm a curator for something called the Women of the World Festival. It's an international festival, and it happens in South Asia. I started with Karachi, and I've been involved with the festival for 2.5 years now. And obviously, it's a feminist festival. So, I guess you don't even think about the impact of these things until I suddenly realized that she was reading about the suffragette movement, and she was really interested in all of this stuff. This is 3 years ago now. She's 10 now, but this is around when she was 7. And the Rebel Girls had just come out, the Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls, which is a fantastic book, and she was reading a lot more of these kind of stories.
So is this book for kids or?
It is. It's for young adults.
Amazing.
And the idea is to create a Pakistani version of the Rebel Girls, because the only issue I had with a lot of these books was that there were very few brown women or very few women of color, I would go on to say. Hardly any Muslim women. Hardly, if there was anybody
so these women are not Pakistani?
No, so the books that were written about earlier, but my book is about Pakistani women.
Oh, great.
So
I feel that content around Pakistani people and then women is missing. Hardly available.
So, there's this truism, right? You cannot be what you cannot see. So and there's, again, I don't have to talk about this because this I know for sure. Plenty of people have spoken, written, researched this, that representation is so very, very important. So if you're not seeing in all the books that you read, in all the television shows that you watch, in everything that you're exposed to, women at all, and if you're not seeing women that look like you, sound like you, have backgrounds like you, are from the country you're from at the very least, I'm not going to say it's impossible, because obviously people do get there despite that. It's just harder. It's a lot harder to imagine yourself in that space. So for example, growing up, I really wanted to be an astronaut. That's what I wanted to be.
It's a funny thing you say that, because all my friends who know me, I wanted to be an astronaut.
Yeah, I know, right? But
that's hilarious. I've never come across anyone who wanted to be an astronaut.
Desperately, until I was 8, wanted to be an astronaut. But then gradually I realized that, I didn't grow up in the US. That's where NASA is, right? What do you read about? I'm not saying I would have been an astronaut had there been a brown woman in space before I was reading about them, but it might have helped. Who knows?
Yeah. And I think the content that is, so reading, yes, but I also think that in the media, all the dramas that we're mostly watching, they portray. Although I believe, at least in the ad space, that's changing. Some of the ads
are quite
amazing, now, now you no longer see the chai trolley being pushed in by the girl. Now it's more sort of. But the dramas, I think, still need a lot of work.
For sure.
And maybe this book can be converted into a drama.
Gosh, no. So it's the stories of 50 women from Pakistan, all of whom are incredible. It's called Fearless. It's coming out inshallah, in August. It's being published by Penguin India. And the funny thing about this book is it's taken me forever to write it. And it's no crime and punishment. It shouldn't have taken me this long. But the reason it's taken me this long is that with work, so I consult, I run Polly and Other Stories, and this became my third project. it became about, do I spend this time with the kids or do I write the book? And quite often those are choices that will, because when you're writing, at least when I'm writing, I do need a spot of quiet, very hard to find if you have young children. And so the book often took a back seat. And I'll say this for Penguin, they've been so great. So this book should have been published last year. It was in their catalog for earlier part of this year. It's not in the stores yet. The catalog's gone out. The book is still not there. And they've been nothing but amazing. And I think that's coming from the fact that the editors I'm working with are women too. And I think they just get it. They just get it. They're like, and that's a choice I made last year. I was like, I'm going to push myself. But again, who decided? Because I think this happens a lot in the startup economy. There's this whole sense of, oh, we're doing the whole VC thing here, right? And it's like, you've got to grow your business tenfold.
I know, 10x exponential
and I'm
growth.
Like, who decided these numbers made any sense? I didn't get into this industry to be the top startup of the year. I got into this space to make a difference, because that's important to me as a person. And again, I have the privilege to make the world that I want my children to grow up in, right? Why shouldn't I use that privilege? Why can't I go ahead and try and do things that I think are important? Why do I have to wait for somebody else to come and be a savior? That's not going to happen. So that's why I do what I do. But more importantly, it's like, who decided that success has to be a particular model? And this is something I'm really beginning to kind of grapple with, because I've realized I am very unkind to myself, or have been, because I'm always like, you're not doing well enough. And this is what you were talking about, that imposter syndrome, where you're just so scared that you've managed to fool like maybe 10 people, and you're afraid to reach just a little bit higher, because you're like, the 11th person, they're going to figure out I'm a con act. So let me just say, in this nice safe space where I've managed to con these people, because even if you're getting external validation, you don't believe that you're doing a good job. And for some of us, it might be just setting the standards too high.
And this is just women, or does this happen
mostly
across
women.
the
I'm
board?
pretty sure men suffer from it too, but a lot of women I know suffer from this syndrome, where you're constantly, you don't need anybody to tell you you're failing. You're constantly telling yourself you're failing. You're
Even when you're not.
Even when you're not. So even when you'll have friends, family, and you're just like, oh, they're just being nice. So you won't say that to them perhaps, but there's a voice inside you which is just like, oh, they're just saying that because they love me, or they're just saying that because they want to be nice. But actually, why would everybody want to be nice to you? I mean, there's no real reason. They don't have to be nice. And then you keep reminding yourself that when I'm praising another person, am I just doing it to be nice, or am I saying things I mean? And why can't it be the same thing for me, that people are saying nice things about me because they're true? But it's a very, very hard thing for women, because we're just so used to, because if you're doing well on one aspect of what you're supposed to do well in, say you're doing well at work, you're thriving, you're the CEO of some massive corporation, then you are definitely convinced that you're a bad wife, a bad mother, a bad sister.
Guilt syndrome.
Yeah, and as we're growing up, growing older, definitely a bad daughter, because you've got aging parents to deal with as well as aging in-laws. And then you feel this insane amount of guilt, where suddenly your work seems selfish, because could the bills in my house be paid if I stopped working? Yeah, I come from that privilege. We all do. Many of us do. I don't have to, because that's the other thing in our society, which I have a big problem with. The narrative that bichari kaam karti hai because she has to is the only acceptable narrative. Because why else would you? Why else
People don't
would you?
understand.
They don't.
Yeah.
That you can be, and it's not about being ambitious. I've never been particularly ambitious. I'm not like I need to be top off this. What drives me, as I said, is meaning and purpose. Always has it. All the work I've ever done. If I find it meaningful, I will do it whether it's recognized or not. That's fine for me. But the minute it stops being meaningful, it's a lot harder to push me.
Amneh, thank you so much. That was such an incredible insight into your life, and you're doing all these multiple things. That is, it's truly something
I
that
don't recommend it.
But I mean, this is what I feel is that we are blessed, and we have that privilege. We have the privilege to create jobs, and so in today's day and age where it's becoming so difficult, we must do this for our kids and the next generation, basically.
If you want to see a better world, make it.
And in our country, I mean, a lot of people I know move out. I don't want to move out. I want to
Yeah.
see those changes, all the positives that we see. I want to bring them here.
Yeah, there's so much opportunity because there's so many gaps.
Yeah.
There's so much you can do. So much.
Mom Professionals, I hope you enjoyed that session. As usual, please write in to us. Tell us what you thought, your suggestions, and if you'd like to be part of this this series, please do inbox me. Thank you.